welcome everybody to our Soul Path Wisdom class. And today we're going to look at the chart of the singer, songwriter, incredible fashion designer, Selena. And not to be confused with Selena Gomez, who's much younger, but this is the Selena who lived and died going back into what seems like such a long time ago. And we'll look at the specifics as we go forward. So first, a little bit of the history. She was born April 16th, 1971, and died March 31st 1995 at the age of 23. Uh, she was, as I said, singer, songwriter, fashion designer, businesswoman, and considered the queen of Tejano music. Tejano music is kind of like Mexican country music. It has kind of a beat and a rhythm that sometimes reminds us of polka music. The accordion was brought to uh, that country. So as it was brought to other countries too. There was sort of that idea of that kind of music box. I think that's also kind of interesting to think about, that it was the missionaries going to India that wanted to have church organ music, and they were able to create a little tiny box that could be played for people to kind of mimic this music. Anyway, her album, Dreaming of You, was the first Latin artist to debut in the top Billboard 20. And it was her first English album and a major event, that it was a crossover from, singing in Spanish, being mostly someone who was uh, followed by the Spanish-speaking populations in America and also in Mexico and other countries that speak Spanish. And 30 million records sold worldwide back in the day when we had records. Now, of course, it's all streaming. She was the youngest of three children, her sister Suzette and her brother known as AB. She was incredibly musically talented as a small child. And the father, who had wanted to be a musician, sort of a frustrated musician, had to take a regular job in order to support his family. Like, many others, you can think of Michael Jackson's father, Britney Spears' father. Sometimes these fathers are, kind of on both sides of things. They are extremely driven. They are hard on their kids, insisting that they are excellent, and sometimes get accused of kind of using their children or their child as a wealth path for themselves. So they can be kind of a mixed energy, very, very encouraging of children's talent, but also heavily invested in it. And so we've got some dates here that we're going to look at. The Grammy was March 1st, 1994. She eloped with a bandmate, Chris Perez, who her father did not approve of her having a relationship with, and they decided that was the only way that he would approve, is if they'd already gotten married. So they went off and secretly got married. And she was killed by a woman who had been her friend and employee for a really long time, Yolanda Saldivar. And Yolanda had started the Selena fan club, and was, at the time of the death, had been the manager of her Selena's boutiques, where she was selling clothes and other things that she was designing or bringing in. And she suspected Yolanda of, pilfering her money, of stealing from her, and confronted her about it. And Yolanda shot her. There's several places to get more information about her. There is the movie, the biopic, where Jennifer Lopez plays her. It's called Selena. Then there was a two-season Netflix series uh, that was called Selena the Series, that was published in 2020 and 2021. And then just recently, Netflix put out more of a documentary about her and the family called Selena y los Dinos. And this was what I watched recently. I'd watched the original movie with Jennifer Lopez a long time ago. So watching it again made me be thinking of her again. And as I'm getting ready to present a talk at NORWAC this year on the soul of the creative, she is one of the people that I wanted to look at in terms of, someone who clearly was creative from the time she was a very small child. The first time the family heard her sing, they were kind of amazed and had her, they put together this little family band, and these children were like playing at local dances and things like that, and moving more and more and more out into the world, getting to the point where they got an old bus and they rehabbed it so they could drive around from location to location, first in the Southwest area, and then ultimately, she, started really publishing music and being out there in a much wider audience. So let's think for a moment what we might be looking at in terms of creativity. So we're going to use her chart today as an example chart to help us think about first how we can see creativity in the chart. And second of all, uh, some quick and easy ways to do a little bit of chart rectification. So chart rectification is when you don't have any birth time at all, or you have a birth time that's maybe a little questionable. And if you do it correctly, well, there's software these days that helps you do it, but basically you take at least 10 significant events in the person's life and you plot them. If you were doing it by hand, you would create the chart and you would see where major planets were on angles specifically, because the angles, the ascendant, which represents south, the IC, fourth house cusp, that represents home and family, the seventh house cusp, the descendant, that represents partnership, and the MC or midheaven, that represents career and how the soul shows up in the world in a public way. These are the four main areas of life. And when you have a significant event in your life, an accident, an illness, a wedding, an honor of some kind, there's normally the planets that are related to that kind of event showing up on one of these angles. And this is how you can fine tune the birth time. As I'm approaching working with Selena's chart, we have a birth time that her biographer, not a biographer that she chose or the family chose, but someone who just did their own biography, he has a very specific time, but nobody can find any real evidence about that. And then you can use the sunrise chart, which is what I would normally do for a regular person. And many people use the noon chart, especially for someone who's famous, because that puts the sun at the top where all can see. Okay. But that doesn't, that doesn't always track. There's lots and lots of famous people who do not have their sun at the midheaven. So that I don't necessarily go with that. I tend to find that the sunrise chart, where you put the sun on the ascendant and is the basis of sun sign astrology, this often gives a pretty good sense. It's got a certain validity on its own, and we can see a lot of truth from the sunrise chart quite often. And some people do a sunrise chart and then they put the moon at the place that it's going to be at midday so that you can see it, either side. It's either going to be before the noon moon or after the noon moon. But I feel like I can figure that out in my head when I look at it, and I'll know the moon is in a particular sign up to sunrise, and then we'll see does it change in the day after that. So back to the creativity slide, so you understand what I'm looking at. I'm going to first notice the lunar nodes. Of course, I'm going to the lunar nodes as an evolutionary astrologer anyway. And when we see the south node in Pisces, Leo, or Libra, three signs that have a lot to do with creativity, that's one factor. The planets, Venus, the planet of artistry, and Neptune, the planet of high creativity, high love, soul-centered energy, something that's amazing, beautiful, transcendent, is often coming through Pisces and Neptune. Then we have the signs Leo, creative expression and performance. Pisces, again, more transcendent creativity. And Libra, again, the artistry, so like Venus. The fifth house, of course, is creative expression. We know that. And sometimes, if there's creative indicators in the 10th house, we're thinking of someone who's creative in a way that is famous ultimately. The quintiles and the biquintiles, quintiles divide the chart by a factor of 5, and the aspects can be 72 degrees or 144 degrees. This is the aspect really that is known for intense creativity, and many creatives have a number of quintiles or biquintiles in their chart. If we want to look at asteroids, I'm sure there are others, but on the level of just the basic asteroids that most of us know about and think about, Pallas Athena is the one that is known for a certain amount of artistry and skillfulness in, making things. Mm, Pluto in the fifth house. Pluto always has a lot to do with our destiny. So if it's in a creative sign, if it's in the fifth house, but especially Pluto in the fifth house is considered to be particularly destined location for Pluto, where we could say that there's something about the deep levels of accomplishment of creativity that is soul fulfilling. And then Uranus shows us mental brilliance. A lot of times, strong Uranus is someone who's inventing things and new directions. It's kind of a channeling process. And when we say creativity, sometimes we can automatically think of art and artists and paintings. We can extend it, and then we think of the musicians, of course, dancers, but also writers. Obviously, that's a very creative process. Sometimes we can look at someone's chart and go, "Oh, you're very creative," and they say, "No, I can't draw a straight line. I've never been creative." Or they have Pluto or Capricorn ruling their fifth house, and they have a very, very strong inner critic. So sometimes these other features balance things out, and it takes a while for a person to accept that they're creative. But you can tell a person they're creative and they think art and they say no. But if you then point out that you're looking at Mercury in the third house and Uranus for the mental creativity, and we say, well, what about writing? Then we're like, oh, yeah, yeah, definitely, I love to write. So we see that. Uh, Painters, definitely more on the Neptune Pisces side. And then I thought, crafts are a part of creativity as well. So here we see Pallas Athena again, and we see the practical home-oriented signs like Taurus and Cancer. And I noticed one of our people here today was knitting, and that is, that is part of creativity as well. Oh, no, 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 I don't want to stop the share. Okay. So this first chart is Selena's chart using the time that her biographer, a guy named Joe Patowski, uh, this is the time that he says is her time, even though he doesn't give any backup for that. But 2:29 a.m., that sounds like it is coming from a birth certificate or, a baby record or something like that. So as we're looking at these charts today, This is what I'm going to be thinking about and want you to think about as well. We want to think about the signs of the chart and do they show creativity from a young age? Might they show a dad that's a controlling person as a manager, supportive but also difficult disciplinarian? The strong sibling connection. She was close to her siblings and they performed together for her whole life. I mean, basically 20 years. She was 3, 4, 5 when she started singing. Mm. The designing of clothes, that's a little bit different kind of creativity than just the music. And what do we see in the chart about fame and success? Obviously, in this short class, we're not going to be able to look at everything, but we'll start with this chart and just approaching it. Do I think this chart is legitimate? And the first thing I notice is the South Node in Leo. So the South Node in Leo indicates a person who has been rich, talented, famous, successful in prior lives. That's my starting point for the South Node in Leo. And then when I look at the house that it's in, I'm thinking, well, this is the place that they're deeply familiar and they have become very successful in operating as a soul through this lens, but they still have uh, a habit pattern challenge that over the course of the life they have to deal with. And with the South Node in the seventh house, it indicates that she's probably been identified with her role as a partner. As you know, often this is the case in this patriarchal system that a person was kind of like Mrs. John Smith back in the days, if you're old enough to remember, when women didn't get to have their first names except in very personal situations. You were defined by your husband's name. And so this is the memory bank within her, if this is the right chart. And uh, the goal state to develop the Aquarian North Node is to develop freedom, the freedom to do what she wants to do, to be autonomous, to be authentic to herself. And this chart gives her an Aquarius rising. And there's some things about her personality that because the first house in the rising sign is the personality and the way one is seen front and center when you walk into a room. And it did seem to me, looking at the actual documentary clips of her, that she was could be unique and different. Like she would be seemingly a little shy and quiet sometimes, then very bold and brash. She made clothes that were very unique and uh, beautifully designed, but not traditional at all. And so we can see a little bit of that Aquarian energy. Um, if we look at the fifth house, and the fifth house is ruled by Gemini, and that takes us to the Mercury retrograde in Taurus. Hmm, maybe singer-songwriter. The Mercury is in the third house of writing, of communication, but it's not as strong a fifth house as I might think it would be for how creative she was as a designer, a businesswoman, singer, songwriter. Um, it puts emphasis on the writing a little bit more to me than the performance. The dad energy, we might look at the sun, and of course, the sun is in Aries, so this is a dad who's inspirational, right? The sign of Aries can see who you are on a soul level and help you ground it in the world. That makes sense. Third house, connected to the siblings, having the siblings be the ones who create this band, that makes sense. And we have the Saturn in Taurus. He was, seemed to be a traditional person. He did not want her to get married, certainly not to the rock musician who came into the band. Uh, and, sort of in the mind, sort of in the day-to-day life, the same sign as home and family. So if you're thinking whole sign houses, you're putting Mercury and Saturn into the fourth house. But yeah, Neptune, Jupiter in Sagittarius, 10th house, not in the same sign as the midheaven, but Neptune representing transcendent creativity, uh, Sagittarius, a kind of international flair, Jupiter blowing things up. We can see some potential there. And we can see a moon representing the public that's connected to the 11th house. And here we have, the tribe, the community, being seen and appreciated by the public. We also see Mars here in the 12th house, and Mars represents hidden enemies. And her friend and manager of her boutiques was definitely a hidden enemy. She did not realize that. So honestly, I started out thinking, there's something decent about this chart. I might want to go with this chart. And then I moved to the sunrise chart, which, as I said, is what I would normally use when I don't know the birth time. And here we have the Aries sun and Mercury, the planet of communication, rising, the Aries rising. Very much see, like when you see her perform, you see her dancing, singing, putting herself out there, you can see the Aries. You can also see a little bit of the Aries from the fact that she seemed kind of alone until she met her husband. I mean, yes, she's got the family there, but there's a way that she is a little bit alone within this whole system. More and more, as she's moving into being a teenager, she is the one that people are coming to see. And she's with the group and she loves the group and she's very loyal, but you can kind of sense the loneliness in her a little bit. And it's Mars that rules the chart, rules the sun and rising. And here it is in Capricorn, the sign of accomplishment, mastery, hard work. And that was very clear from watching her life unfold. Like they were working really hard. They were traveling around in this bus all the time and playing one event after another. So that made sense. And she also had, kind of a sexy vibration that people could see. So that seems correct for the rising sign in the Mars. And we have the moon in early Capricorn. It is in the ninth house. It's not, within the 10-degree range of the midheaven that would give it a lot of power, but it still is, part of the Capricorn and ninth house representing international, the world, and the fact that she was an international crossover artist, that made some sense to me. Uh, I should have started though with the South Node. I always have my idea of how I work with the chart and what order I want to do things. And I want to go with the nodes first, the rulers of the nodes, the planets connected to the nodes, and from there fill in the other planets. But somehow just, seeing this ascendant and feeling that fire and that life force in her drew me to that first. And we also see that it is in a trine. Uh, we see the Neptune. Here we have the part of spirit up here in Capricorn. And again, we don't have the real rising sign, so I don't know how much the parts are relevant. But let's just say if it was relevant, if this was the time, Mercury, her voice, her writing, her words, in alignment with part of spirit, where she's operating in alignment with her soul's truth, that feels really relevant. And we could say also that the moon is in a trine with the rising and the sun, and there's a lot of flow between the action, the choices, and the emotional nature. Okay. Now coming back to the South Node in Leo. South Node in Leo conjunct the part of fortune in the fifth house of creative expression. This makes a lot of sense to me in terms of her natural creativity. It's something that's coming through when she's a small child. She already knows how to sing. Nobody has to teach her how to sing. And automatically a performer, very good at it from the outset. So she's still got the same issue of is she going to be tied up in her image, which is the Leo piece? She has to become authentic and become free. But now she's becoming authentic and free and breaking apart, rebelling, kind of cracking through traditions in the 11th house of being connected to the community and out there in the world. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Uh, Having Venus in Pisces as her hidden enemy makes sense. It's a woman, and it's someone who is possibly stealing money from her. Uh, there's that scam untruth level to it. And the Venus is ruling the seventh house of partnership. So, the partner is the hidden enemy here. She has Chiron opposite Uranus, and we see it very strongly when it's here in the 12th and the 6th house. Chiron, as you remember, represents a wound that we have that is not actually accurate. It's a past life memory. And the past life memory with Chiron is in Aries is I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I couldn't cultivate the courage and the bravery to take action and start something and be myself, be filled with life force and vitality. And yet the life shows that in fact you have it, you're doing it, you are independent. And when someone has Chiron in Aries and it's opposite Uranus in Libra, uh, it's an extra strong message because Uranus also is about being authentic and being yourself and doing what you want to do and breaking free of tradition. And while Mars, independence, freedom, courage, rules the chart, the Uranus rules the soul's purpose, the North Node. So to be the breakthrough artist, the one who crosses the line from Latino music into pop music, the one who gets married to someone that her father doesn't approve of and doesn't even want her to see, let alone marry. These are ways that she's very strongly showing her independence and her freedom. We also see quite clearly here a very nice yod where we have Mars and Venus, and they come to the South Node and part of fortune. And for her, that means that she can integrate her Venus in Pisces, Venus artistry, Pisces, the transcendent creativity, dancing music, Mars, passion, will, desire in Capricorn to do something well, excellent, to accomplish it. And it's going to feed into the expression of that Leo karma that she has, the fact that she's been a talented performer for lifetimes and she can make a good amount of money from being in that Leo energy. We also have Jupiter conjunct Neptune, the two planets that are the original rulers of Pisces, and they are, in the eighth house, ruled by Scorpio. We might have a little bit of a foreshadowing here about a death, about a loss. I'm careful about predicting death in the chart because honestly, we have all the outer planets in some way have some connection to different kind of qualities of death. And there are a number of signs that also seem to have a certain quality. So, to really see death, there's a lot of different calculations that you need to see that are all coming together at the same time. And I tend to feel that since death is something that the soul is choosing and leaves, we leave as soon as we're able to, no matter how good our life is. When we're finished, what the mission is, we want to be back in the oneness. Uh, it's not it's not easy to look at the chart and be sure when a person is going to leave because it's the quality of death, the circumstances, what makes sense from the soul's perspective, and it's just not going to be the same for everybody. I'm thinking if there's anything else I want to say about Pluto. And Pluto in Virgo is also hardworking in the sixth house, endless work, which, obviously was happening with her if you consider her performance work right from the very beginning. We also have a trine between the Mars in the 10th house at the midheaven and Saturn in the first house in Taurus. Now, we can see this as her. When you have a Saturn-Mars connection, one can be very successful, especially a trine makes it kind of easy. And it is, part of this little transformation triangle with Venus at the apex of it. So we've got the singing, the dancing, the transcendent creativity. Uh, so we can see this as her ability to work hard and accomplish, really kind of like grinding day to day, which clearly she was. But we can also see this as the father, very strongly identified with her, kind of maybe over identified with her talents and wanting her to be successful in a way that he was not able to be, and driving her to this career, to this expression out in the world. Now, the noon chart, as I said, is what many people use for a famous person. And I, definitely like seeing that sun up there in the 10th house. She's very visible. Uh, Saturn, uh, in the 10th house, on the cusp of the 11th house, maybe the father driving her toward being in her career, being out in the world, the trine to Mars. The Mars is in the area of work, the moon is in the area of work. But I'll say, yeah, we can say the Neptune, Jupiter is in the fifth house of creative expression. But where is the South Node? South Node in Leo is on the second house cusp, about money, resources, maybe skills, but it's not a very prominent place in my mind for the kind of creativity that she had. I would look at this chart and I would be thinking someone was much more of like maybe working in finance. We've got the Capricorn planets in the sixth house. We've got the Mercury in Taurus retrograde in the 10th house. So somebody working with facts and figures in corporate would be a little bit more common in my mind for this. And fundamentally, I don't see her as having Cancer rising. Now, this was a point I wanted to make to you. When you look at the rising sign and you think about this is the way the person meets and greets the world, how people see them, how they want to be seen. Cancer can be loving, nurturing, a little controlling. But you need to look at the planet that rules the rising sign, and this is the moon. Now, if the moon was in Leo, if the moon was in Aries, there I would be more likely to think it's possible. But a Cancer rising ruled by a moon in Capricorn just doesn't track. I just feel like she came forward with a lot more playfulness, lightheartedness, uh, intensity, uh, this is just, yeah, I can't see this chart, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. It doesn't ring true.